Jane Braga is a wonderful, obviously wonderful person. She's lived in Tuolumne County around 30 years. She taught kindergarten, and for me, that they deserve a special place in heaven, kindergarten teachers. She was foreperson of a grand jury a few years ago that did an especially remarkable report. Very knowledgeable, wonderful woman, who's charter member of our group. And she's been ahead of the Voter Services Committee, main kind of a linchpin of our organization, which is keeping the voters informed. And that is what she's going to do today. We're looking forward to your presentation, Jane.
This is a pros and cons presentation on the state ballot propositions and the Tuolumne County measures and Sonora City measures. This PowerPoint presentation was prepared by the State League of Women Voters, for which I am really grateful, because with 12 propositions, it is beneficial to have something visual to look at. For each proposition, I will give some background, explain what the changes to the proposition proposes, what a yes or no vote means, and arguments for and against. Propositions are either legislatively originated or originated by citizens groups. And there is one referendum, which is a recall, which is to recall a law on the ballot. The origin of each proposition will be presented. Although the League recommends that there be an equal number of pros and con arguments, the slides do not always represent that balance. And in those instances, I have added to the appropriate argument to maintain the balance. A word of caution: pros and cons may not always present as logical. They are arguments to support a point of view, and sometimes they may be contradictory. This is where voter discretion comes in and what makes the most sense to you. Also, fiscal effects are projected estimates. At the end of the presentation, I will suggest some sources for further information and further fact checking. It is always interesting to see who supports and opposes each item. As I understand it, this presentation is being recorded, so you'll be able to refer back to it later. You may want to put questions in the chat room, which I will hopefully successfully access with Nan's help. And I will try to get them as we move along to break things up, so we don't have just me droning on forever and ever. It is a kind of a long presentation, and I really don't want to induce and to encourage anybody to go to sleep. So I'll go through all the, so for each proposition and measure, arguments for and against, and I already said that. So let's begin. Proposition 14. Proposition 14 authorizes bonds to continue funding stem cell and other medical research. This is an initiative placed on the ballot by the Californians for Stem Cell Research, Treatment and Cures, a political action committee. It authorizes $5.5 billion in obligation bonds to fund grants from the California Institute of Regenerative Medicine to educational, nonprofit, and private entities for stem cell research and other medical research, medical training, construction of medical facilities. It dedicates $1.5 billion to fund research on Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, stroke, epilepsy, and other brain and central nervous system diseases. The California Institute for Regenerative Medicine was created and funded by Prop 71 in 2004. Prop 71 funded a $3 billion bond for stem cell and other medical research in response to a ban on stem cell research at the federal level. As of June 2020, most of that bond money has been spent. The CIRM needs additional funds to continue. The fiscal effect, the estimated costs are $7.8 billion over 30 years, $5.5 billion in principal and $2.3 billion in interest. These amounts of money are incredible, averaging about $260 million per year. The state would receive revenue from future CIRM inventions, but that revenue is unknown. So the pros, stem cell funding in California has led to, now this is ironic because I can't see the pros and cons because I can't see it. Oh, shoot. because of the screens there. So the pros and cons you can read, and I'm going to add to the pros that the stem cell agency, the CIRM, has generated $726 million in federal tax revenues, $641 million in local and state revenue, and has created over 56,000 additional full-time jobs. So again, the pros and cons are up there for you to read, and I can't. A yes vote means that you approve the sale of bonds for stem cell and other medical research, and a no vote means do not sell bonds for stem cell and other medical research. Prop 15. Prop 15 increases funding for public schools, community colleges, and local government services by changing tax assessment of commercial and industrial property. This is a citizen-initiated initiative for a constitutional amendment. Apparently, the citizens group is Schools and Communities First, a coalition of teachers, nurses, doctors, and small businesses. This was the only one that everything I read said it was citizen-initiated rather than a specific group. But the group that is the main force behind it is the Citizens and Communities First, which is why I said apparently. Prop 13, passed in 1998, limited property tax valuation and rates. The tax rate is capped at 1% of the assessed value when a property is reassessed to its appraised market value when purchased or when ownership changes hands. And after that, the value can be assessed at no more than 2% a year. Each county's property tax receipts from that go back to local governments and schools, 60% to local governments and 40% to schools and community colleges. And it's the funding for this is over and above the current minimum funding for schools. So Prop 15, and when Prop 13 was passed, local governments and schools took a hit economically. So Prop 15 would require commercial and industrial property to be reassessed at market value on a periodic basis, excluding those properties from Prop 13 guidelines, but there would be no change to residential properties from Prop 13 guidelines. And reassessment or commercial of the property would be phased in starting in the 22-23 tax year. The fiscal impact potentially is $6.5 to $11.5 billion per year. So here's what the supporters say, that it will provide lots of billions of new money, that 10% of the wealthiest businesses will provide more than 90% of the revenue. It does give tax breaks to small businesses, which it defines in the bill what a small business is, and it keeps protection for homeowners and renters and farms. Now, the opponents say it would trigger a large tax increase. The additional costs could raise prices for consumers. It could hurt small businesses and would require a huge sum to administer. And again, that sometimes these things contradict each other. So a yes vote means to approve the initiative to change the property tax laws for commercial and industrial property. And a no vote means do not change the property tax laws for commercial and industrial properties. Prop 16. Proposition 16 reinstates affirmative action in California. It repeals Proposition 209, passed in 1996, the Affirmative Action Amendment. It's a legislatively referred constitutional amendment, meaning it was started in the state legislature, and it allows diversity as a factor in public employment, education, and contracting decisions. Prop 209 banned consideration of race, ethnicity, sex, or national origin in California public employment, public education, public contracting, also known as affirmative action. Prop 209 banned affirmative action. Prop 16 reinstates affirmative action in California. There is no direct fiscal effect. So here is what the supporters say. That it means equal opportunity for all Californians. That despite us being a very diverse state and nation, we do not, there are women and people are discriminated against, women and other minorities are discriminated against. And at this time in our history, to overturn affirmative action and end discrimination would be an important step. But the opponents say it would be a step backwards. They don't want to perpetuate the stereotype that minorities and women can't get fair treatment and need special treatment, and that it would be a costly burden. Again, sometimes these things contradict each other. So a yes vote means reinstating affirmative action in California public employment, education, and contracting, and a no vote means continue the ban on affirmative action in California. Proposition 17. Proposition 17 restores the right to vote after completion of a prison term. This, again, is a legislative constitutional amendment beginning in the state, at the state capitol. People in county jail or supervised by county probation are able to vote under California Constitution, but those people on parole for felony convictions are not. Prop 17 would allow people on parole for felony convictions to vote. California is one of 3 states that require persons convicted of felonies to complete their sentence and parole before regaining the right to vote. As of 2020, 19 states allowed people convicted of felonies but were on parole to vote. 2, Maine and Vermont, allowed those imprisoned to vote. 18 states restore voting rights after completion of sentence, parole, and probation. The fiscal effect, hundreds of thousands of dollars statewide. The cost could vary by the number of people who register and the cost of voting materials for each. The one-time cost to update state voter registration, the voter registration system, would be less than 1% of the budget at the state level. So what the supporters say, the pros is that people should be encouraged to have a stake, to rejoin society and have a stake in society, and giving returning the right to vote to them would help do that. And 19 other states allow this. California can too, and nearly 50,000 of Californians who have completed their prison terms pay taxes and yet are prohibited to vote. Opponents say it would allow violent criminals to vote before they've completed their sentence. Parole in California is for serious criminals who have victimized individuals, and it could be painful to the victims. And parole is to provide rehabilitation, and voting is one of those things that after they're rehabilitated, return that right. So a yes vote means to restore the right to vote for people on parole or a felony conviction. And a no vote means people on parole for a felony conviction cannot vote until they have completed their parole. I need a sip of water. Prop 18. Proposition 18 amends the California Constitution to permit 17-year-olds to vote in primary and special elections if they will turn 18 by the next general election and be otherwise eligible to vote. This is a legislative constitutional amendment. Now, it would authorize a U.S. citizen who is 17 years of age, is a resident of the state, and will be 18 years old by the time of the next general election to vote in any primary or special election that occurs before the next general election, in which they would be eligible to vote if at least 18 years of age, which sounds like a mouthful. But for instance, this year, anyone who would be 18 by November 3rd could have voted in the primary election in March. As of June 2020, 18 states, along with Washington, D.C., allow this. The fiscal effect, potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars a year at the county level for extra voting materials, and less than 1% of the state election budget to update voter registration systems. So the supporters say it would allow 17 and 18-year-olds to participate in a full election cycle. It would boost the number of youth who would vote. 17 and 18-year-olds are heavily affected by the policies, and they should be able to vote on them. Not allowing the 17-year-olds to vote in the primary can discourage them from voting in the general and encourages young people to be involved in the lifelong journey of voting. But opponents say allowing 17-year-olds to vote on issues like debt and taxes, it doesn't affect them, so they should not be allowed to to vote on those. 17-year-olds are too young to vote before they don't have enough life experience. Their brains are not fully developed in logic and reasoning. And schools would persuade 17-year-olds, could persuade 17-year-olds to or advocate for certain policies. And only 18 other states allow 17-year-olds to vote. So a yes vote means allow 17-year-olds who will turn 18 before the next general election to vote in the primary and special elections. And a no vote means keep the voting age at 18. Proposition 19. Proposition 19 changes certain property tax rules. It is a legislative constitutional amendment. Currently, seniors, residents with severe disabilities, and victims of wildfires and natural disasters, and victims of hazardous waste contamination can transfer their tax assessments within counties to homes of equal or lesser value one time, maintaining their a lower tax base. Proposition 19 allows those same people, they can transfer their tax base to a home of greater market value anywhere in California up to 3 times. Inherited homes, such as those not used as principal residences, such as second homes or rentals, will be reassessed at market value. Ballot measure would apply to certain farms. The fiscal effect could be tens of millions of dollars a year in potential revenue increases. The state administrative costs potentially would be tens of millions of dollars a year. Supporters say that it expands the rules for the transfer of tax base for seniors and that whole group, and it closes tax loopholes on inherited properties. Opponents say that the California Constitution was already amended 3 times to protect property for transfer of property, and the reassessment to market value could force people to sell inherited homes because of higher property taxes. So a yes vote on 19 means to change the transfer of property tax rules for seniors, the severely disabled, etc. A no vote means to keep the property tax rules the way they are. Proposition 20. Proposition 20 restricts parole for nonviolent offenders, authorizes felony sentences for certain offenses currently treated only as misdemeanors. This is an initiative statute. It was initiated by law enforcement groups. Assembly Bill 109, Prop 47, and Prop 57 were passed in 2011, 2014, and 2016 respectively, with the intent to reduce the state prison population in response to a Supreme Court decision addressing overcrowding in the state's prisons. The state declared conditions cruel and unusual punishment. The state was ordered to reduce the state's prison population. Prop 20 adds more crimes to the list of violent felonies for which early parole is restricted. It recategorizes certain types of theft and fraud crimes as wobblers. Wobblers are crimes that can be charged as either a misdemeanor or a felony, and requires DNA collection for certain misdemeanors. It establishes 2 additional types of crimes, serial crime and organized retail crime, and it charges them as wobblers, or which can be either a misdemeanor or a felony. The fiscal effect, it increases state and local costs tens of millions of dollars annually as prison population increased. So supporters say it reclassifies certain crimes. It would not increase the prison population. It would only ensure that people complete their crime, their full sentences, and it would help start car break-ins and other theft that has been on the increase. Opponents say it will roll back prison reform and cost taxpayers millions of dollars annually, that it slashes mental health and other programs that help people in prison and to reduce repeat offenses, and it will result in extreme sentences for and will affect for minor crimes and will disproportionately affect minorities. A yes vote means changing parole guidelines to restrict parole access for certain nonviolent crimes, changing nonviolent crimes to misdemeanors, nonviolent misdemeanors to felonies, and allows DNA samples from adults convicted of some misdemeanors. A no vote means to keep the parole and sentencing laws as they are. Yeah, I'm going to stop there for a moment and see. Well, I'll see if I can stop. Nan says I push pause, and then she says, oh, wait, well, it went away. I go here to chat. Okay. So let's see, any questions? And
I don't think you have any questions in chat.
I'm seeing all these instructions about the screen.
Yes.
So,
But
which hopefully
maybe we could have some verbal questions if Leo could moderate that for us.
We'll do just for a few minutes and then I'll go back. If anybody has any questions at anything so far, or if I put everybody to sleep and.
I think we're all quite awake and you're doing great. And I suggest you just.
I had a question.
Continue.
Okay.
I have a question.
Okay.
Back on the proposition for the letting them vote with prison terms, I think it was
Yeah.
Prop 17. In one of the states, I've forgotten which one, they're also requiring them to pay any fines or restitution charges.
That's in
Is
Florida.
that included in ours in California?
I'm sorry. What did you ask about? I interrupted you and didn't hear your actual question.
Oh, the question is, in this California proposition, does it
Yeah.
include restoring or paying up any of their making restitution for any of their
No.
fines or their sentences?
No, it does not.
Because in one state, I've forgotten which one it was.
Florida.
Is it Florida?
Yes.
Yeah, they're requiring them now that they have to pay up everything in
Right.
order to vote.
Right.
And now we're back to the whole question of trying to keep people from voting.
Right. So Proposition 21. Proposition 21 expands local government's authority to enact rent control on residential property. This is an initiative statute initiated by the AIDS Healthcare Foundation. Currently, properties 15 years old, built after February 1st, 1995, are subject to the Costa-Hawkins Act, which restricts rent control laws and requires that landlords receive a fair rate of return. Proposition 21 would apply rent control to all housing more than 15 years old, with the exception of single-family homes owned by landlords owning 1 or 2 properties. Cities and counties could limit how much a landlord can increase rents by up to 15% during the first 3 years after a renter moves in. It requires a fair rate of return for the landlord. The fiscal effect is unclear. Supporters say that even small rent increases can put a burden on the entire community and can contribute to homelessness. Many seniors and veterans already have few resources, and adding to their rent could make it more difficult. And Proposition 21 guarantees landlords a fair rate of return. Opponents say that more than 60% of Californians rejected a similar measure in 2018, that rent control results in less affordable housing, and that it could stop new housing and jobs and could hurt the economic recovery. So a yes vote on proposition, this means that to allow rent control for properties more than 15 years old, they would be subject to new rent control laws. A no vote means no new rent control laws for properties more than 15 years old. All right. Proposition 22. It changes employment classification rules for app-based transportation and delivery drivers. This is an initiative statute. It was initiated by Uber and Lyft. Assembly Bill 5 was passed by lawmakers in 2019. It classified rideshare and delivery drivers as employees rather than independent contractors. These companies must then provide employee protections and benefits to drivers. Proposition 22 reclassifies app-based drivers as independent contractors, not as employees. Drivers would receive minimum earnings, health care subsidies, and vehicle insurance. The fiscal effect would be the same as before AB 5 was passed. So supporters say that classifying app-based drivers as employees could lead to longer wait times, less access to rideshare and delivery services because they are app-based. And opponents say that would eliminate basic workplace rights, and the current law does not limit worker hours. So a yes vote means to let app-based drivers be independent contractors of their companies, and a no vote means that app-based drivers will be employees of their companies. Proposition 23 authorizes state regulation of kidney dialysis clinics. It establishes minimum staffing and other requirements. This is an initiative statute, and it was initiated by SEIU UHW, which is a labor union for healthcare workers. Of the approximately 600 kidney dialysis clinics in California, the majority are owned or run by 1 or 2 for-profit companies whose estimated annual revenue is $3 billion. Most dialysis care is paid for by Medicare and Medi-Cal with fixed rates. Private insurers also pay with negotiated rates, which are much higher than government rates. Proposition 23 would require an on-site physician while patients are being treated. It would require them to report data on dialysis-related infections and to obtain consent from the health department before closing a clinic, and they could not discriminate against patients based on their source of payment. The fiscal effect: the cost of physician on-site could increase cost to clinics by several $100,000 a year. Other potential costs are unclear. Supporters say that the patients should have access to a physician whenever receiving dialysis treatment. The proper reporting and transparencies encourages clinics to improve quality, and that strong protections should be provided for patients whenever clinics close. Opponents say the Prop 23 would force many community dialysis clinics to close. It could make our physician shortage even worse, and it could, clinics are already strictly regulated and provide high quality care. So a yes vote for this means requiring kidney dialysis clinics to have a doctor present during treatment hours and to establish minimum staffing and other requirements. A no vote means keep kidney dialysis clinics operating as they are.
Jane,
Yes.
before you go on to the next question, the next presentation, there are two questions. One, Prop 17. Does it include violent crimes like sex offenders, murders, and rapists? 17 is the one giving the
Right.
people.
And the way they define what it's including is non-serious, non-violent crimes. And so that's what that's how the state law defines it. So to really get a sense of it, you kind of have to go back and look at the bill, which you can do on Ballotpedia or the Secretary of State. It gets kind of complicated how they divide it up, because how it's presented by one group is presented differently by different groups.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you. And question number 2, who are the groups opposed to Proposition 21? I'm guessing they are investment groups formed to scrutinize resident homes.
I did not, in pros and cons, I don't include the groups that support and oppose. And that's one of the things that at the going to some of the sites, well, even in the voters pamphlet, it will have who opposes and supports them. But for pros and cons, I don't include that. But that's something that's definitely worth doing research, looking at to see.
So they could look in the voters pamphlet.
They could.
All right. Thank you. Those are all.
Okay.
Good job, Jane.
Thank you. Okay, so Proposition 24 amends consumer privacy laws. It is an initiative statute initiated by Alistair McTaggart, a San Francisco-based real estate developer. The California Consumer Privacy Act of 2018 was based on an initiative proposed by Alistair McTaggart, who terms the act a great baseline. The CCPA gave consumers more control over the personal information that businesses collect about them. It gave consumers the right to know about personal information businesses collect, the right to delete personal information collected about them, the right to opt out of the sale of their personal information, and the right to non-discrimination for exercising their CCPA rights. Proposition 24 is a 52-page document that amends the CCPA of 2018 to increase penalties for companies that fail to follow the rules. It allows consumers to more easily opt in and out of sharing data. It changes criteria for which businesses need to comply. And it creates a new agency, the California Privacy Protection Agency, to additionally enforce and implement consumer privacy laws and impose fines. Proposition 24 triples the maximum penalties for violations concerning consumers under age 16. The fiscal effect: the new Consumer Privacy Protection Agency could cost $10 million annually, adjusted over time to fund. Costs to the DOJ, Department of Justice, and trial courts could be offset by fines. Okay, supporters say that it could prevent businesses from sharing sensitive data. And by virtue of being a ballot initiative, it is less vulnerable to watering down through the legislative process. So a yes vote means to approve changes to the consumer privacy laws, and a no vote means to leave the consumer privacy laws as they are. Oh, sorry about that. Okay, opponents puts the burdens on consumers for their to opt out. There's hidden economic discrimination potentially, meaning there's concern that it could allow providers to charge consumers for opting out. And it would allow employers access to data, private information on their employees. So again, a yes is to approve the changes, and a no means to keep the consumer privacy laws as they are. All right. Proposition 25. This is a referendum to overturn a 2018 law that replaced the money bail system with a system based on public safety risk. The American Bail Coalition organized a PAC, a political action committee, to repeal SB 10 through referendum. So the cash bail system is a system wherein the suspect pays a cash bond to be released from bail pending trial with the promise to return to court for trial and hearings. The cash bond is repaid to the suspect after their trial is completed, no matter the outcome. Suspects could post bail with their own money or through a commercial bail bond agent. Those who pays the full amount in exchange for a non-refundable premium. In California, there is no law capping the premiums on bail bonds. So SB 10, State Bill 10 was designed to make California the first state to end the use of cash bail for all detained suspects awaiting trial. It would replace the cash bail system with risk assessments to determine whether a detained suspect would be granted pretrial release and under what conditions. Suspect categories would be low risk, medium risk, and high risk. California legislators approved SB 10, and it was signed into law in August of 2018. The veto referendum to overturn the bill was filed the next day. The American Bail Coalition organized the political action committee, Californians Against the Reckless Bail Scheme, to support the effort to repeal SB 10 and prevent it from being implemented. The fiscal effect is unclear, with the state and local costs for implementing the new system to be offset by funds already being spent on the current system. County jail costs could potentially decrease, a potential increase in consumer revenue due to not paying bail costs. Now, the supporters say that the current system favors rich defendants who can more easily make bail and keeps poor defendants and people of color in jail. And people who are eventually found not guilty or maybe even not charged are still stuck with the premium on their bail bond fee. But opponents say the intentions of SB 10 are good, but may effectively result in more people in jail under the current system. And it could cost taxpayers hundreds of thousands of dollars a year and overburden the courts with a new bureaucracy. A yes vote means to keep SB 10, replacing the cash bail system with a risk assessment system. A no vote means rescind SB 10 and retain the cash bail system. So those are the 12 ballot measures, the state ballot measures. So questions on those before we move on to the Tuolumne County? Or shall I just move on to the Tuolumne County?
Let's check the chat and see what we have, Jane.
Jane,
Okay, that's a challenge for me.
Jane,
Okay,
this is Elsie. I have a
prop-
question.
Chat.
Elsie, what was that?
Yeah.
Sorry, oops.
Jane, are you going to review the recommendations that the League of Women Voters has made on the propositions?
No, I'm not, because those are quite lengthy, and that was one thing I was going to talk about.
Okay.
That, yeah, so I'll talk about that in a bit.
Okay,
And there's one, Jane, that says Prop 20, prop mentions violent offenders, but the text of the proposition does not seem to support that contention.
Prop 20, which is,
That is the one to support the reclassification, I believe. And cut back on,
right. Well, and I tell you, it got pretty complicated, and there were a lot of, so in my condensation of it, my condensed version, I didn't list everything, but, and the language they use in the bill is non-serious and non-violent crimes. And so those were curious terms to me if we're referring to felonies. So again, I think that's one that, for clarification, look at the bill, look at some of the other sources, the League of Women Voters, Ballotpedia, the Voters Guide.
okay. And we will have all those listed somewhere.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't see any more questions in chat. So oh no, one more. Proposition 25, the opposition slide refers to hundreds of millions of dollars, but Jane, you said hundreds of thousands of dollars allowed. Oh,
Okay, well,
which is-
okay. Look, the slide, because what happens on my screen, I've got a picture, I've got the Zoom thing is blocking the right hand side. So I didn't
right.
always get that correct. Sorry about that.
All right. Other than that, it seems like it's going very, very well. Thank you.
Okay.
Are you ready? Are you ready for the local ones?
Yes.
All
Can I
right.
make a comment?
Claudia, a quick comment. Yes.
Yes, very quick. It's just that I was sent, and I imagine everyone else, by the league, what we were given their stance on the propositions, and it was sent on September 4th, 1920.
Right.
Just to,
Yeah, and you can go to their website also.
I mean,
It's on their
2020.
website.
Yes.
Yeah.
okay.
Thank you for the reminder, Claudia. Okay, Jane.
Okay.
Thank you very much. I'm leaving because I'm not going to listen to the Tuolumne issues. Thanks very much, Jane.
Oh, you're
Thank you.
welcome.
Thank you for
very much.
attending, Marilyn. You're always welcome.
Thanks so much. Good luck.
Good to
Thank you.
see you, Marilyn. Thank
Nice
you
to
for
see you.
coming.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Oh, shoot. Oh, well. Okay, so and I don't have slides, obviously, for the our Tuolumne County stuff. Well, so we can look at the dog. So now, interestingly enough, we have one Tuolumne County measure and 3 city measures, and all but one were on the March ballot also. The city, Tuolumne County and Sonora City, both have TOT taxes, the transient occupancy tax. In the county voted on a TOT tax in the March primary, and it was defeated. And the city did not have it on their ballot for the March primary. Their advice had been to wait until the general election. That tax measures tended to do better in a general election than in a primary election. So, and then the county decided with when the pandemic added to the financial problems of the county, they decided to put the TOT tax back on the ballot, feeling that A, they had not advocated for it adequately, and B, that had people, if people had understood more what it was and how it was implemented, that they would have approved it. So I know.
Someone needs to mute the
My
cuckoo
cuckoo,
clock.
that's my cuckoo clock.
Oh,
Sorry. Sorry. It's now
into-
done. Yeah. So, so the transient occupancy tax, it's also known as a hotel tax. The measures are to increase the TOT tax by 2%. So currently it's at 10%. It would go to 12%. And this would expand the tax to include campgrounds and recreational vehicle parks. They estimate that for the city, it could generate approximately $80,000 annually, and for the county, $4,500,000 annually. A simple majority is required for its approval. Both Calaveras and Mariposa County already have a TOT tax of 12%. So we would be matching our neighboring counties. The pros are that the increased revenue will help keep pace with the cost of continuous changes and updates to state and federal mandates, and that the visitors to our county share the tax burden to help protect, share the tax burden to help protect the county and keep it protect the county health, safety, and quality of life, and the infrastructure from which they benefit. The cons are that the county is already, and the country as a whole, is in a depressed economy, and this is not a good time to raise taxes. Also, funds from a TOT cannot be earmarked. They go into the general fund. So a yes on the TOT tax means that it would increase from 10% to 12%, and a no means keep it at 10%. At the city level, Sonora City, there are two measures, Measures R and Measure S. And Measure R, and I'm combining them because they're similar. Measure R is, shall the office of the city clerk be appointive, and Measure S is, shall the office of the city treasurer be appointive. Now, state law requires cities to have a city clerk and a city treasurer, and they can be either elected or appointed. They're appointed positions in the majority of California cities, so they can ensure the persons in these positions have the personal and professional skills necessary to carry out the duties of the offices. Currently, both positions are elected positions, and the Sonora City Council cannot appoint a city clerk or treasurer without the measure being changed by the voters. As elected offices, the only requirements are that the city clerk or city treasurer be at least 18 years old, be registered voter of the city, and a resident of the city. If the measures are approved, the city council can establish minimum requirements for the jobs, can perform regular performance reviews, and would be able to terminate for unsatisfactory performance. In addition, the city would not be subject to the expense of holding an election every 4 years. The city is required to hold an election even if there are no candidates, and in the last general election, there were no candidates for either position. And the pros and cons, there were no arguments against either of those measures, so they stand as written with the support of the city council. So a yes vote means to change the city clerk and city treasurer positions, to convert them to appointed offices, and a no vote means to keep them as elective offices that no one runs for. So, so that is it. So going to, for more information, the Voters Edge website you can type in your street address or your zip code, either one, and you will get everything that is on your ballot. So including all of our local races. And so for information on everything there. Also, the League of Women Voters website, there is the Easy Voter Guide is on there. Their recommendations, their pros and cons are on there. Their recommendations are really interesting because they do not give a recommendation on every proposition. They only give recommendations on propositions that have a, the league has a position that it would reflect a league position. So it's very interesting to read their explanations for their support or opposition to various measures. And on some, they are neutral. And on one, they have no position at all because they don't, there's nothing that we have that on which we could base any kind of decision. So, and then ballotpediacalifornia.com is an excellent source, as is Secretary of State's office. That's where you can find the actual bills, and they'll have, and also who supports it, who's financing the bills. And so there's a lot of places to look to get more information. Some of the propositions to me seem to beg more information than others. And again, of course, and also the general election guide.